Gary. Gary started at the American Cancer Society first as a volunteer. He's a business guy through and through, an executive through his career. Came to the American Cancer Society as a volunteer and then stepped in as our CEO a few years back and has been our top staff leader now for a number of years and really helped lead the American Cancer Society through many important years, but really last year being such a critical year with all we were dealing with COVID. So excited to have Gary a part of the group today. And Gary, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, David. And I tell you, it's I just want to join Dave in thanking each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to have this meeting this morning. This is a critically important group, and we make sure that we'll be finished on time because we know your time is very valuable to you. But I'm going to make a few comments. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are in the fight against cancer, what the American Cancer Society is doing right now, and then how we think with your help and with your leadership that we can have an even greater impact in the great state of Wisconsin as far as fighting this disease. It's interesting, I spent 37 years in the pharmaceutical and biotech industry, spent most of it with Johnson & Johnson. And I used to run J&J's oncology business. And as a result of that, I had the opportunity to participate in a committee that former George H.W. Bush, number 41, was leading. And he and his wife, Barbara, lost their second child, Robin, to childhood leukemia at the age of 3. So once he left office, he and Barbara spent the majority of their time really helping fight this disease. And I'll never forget President Bush. I was in a meeting with him, and he said, any time that I've wanted to really make things happen, I've reached out to CEOs. He said, because CEOs, they set the agenda, they're decisive, and they get things done. And boy, those words are so true. And that's why CEOs are so critical to us in this cancer fight. So we need your help. We need your help helping us creating a culture of health, both in your companies and in your communities, and raising the awareness of prevention, both for your employees and for your communities. And, we're emerging from this pandemic just as you are in your individual organizations. And we really are reaching out to business leaders just like you to make sure going forward that we can have even greater impact. Now, have some really positive news to share. Every January, we publish Cancer Facts and Figures, which is, if you will, is the Bible for the cancer community. It's the most quoted reference out there in cancer. It's the one that you hear on national news when someone loses their life to cancer, some celebrity. They say, according to the American Cancer Society. The good news is the mortality rate for cancer has continued to drop since 1991. We reported in January that since 1991 through 2018, the mortality rate has dropped 31%. As a matter of fact, between 2017 and 2018, the decrease was 2.4%, which is the greatest decrease that we've ever had in 1 year. So we're moving in the right direction. We also published some work in 2018 that said that we believe that between 2015 and 2035, that we can reduce the mortality in cancer by another 40%. And we believe that is possible, but we can only do it if we're all working together as a country and as individuals, to make this happen. So, to say the least, we're not going to talk a lot about 2020. It was certainly challenging and somewhat devastating for all of us, but we were able to survive, and we had great support from our partners and from our CEOs and from all of our volunteers. And we are emerging right now from 2020. We're certainly a much leaner organization. But I'd also say that we are more focused, and we're really focused on impact, on where can we, based upon our knowledge, our 108 years of experience fighting this disease, where can we have the greatest impact? So just briefly, we are the largest nonprofit funder of cancer research in the United States. We fund over $100 million a year in groundbreaking research. Since 1949, we have funded over $5 billion in research. 49 of those researchers we funded early in their careers have gone on to win the Nobel Prize in Medicine. So we think we have a pretty good track record of not only picking the best research, but the best researchers. So obviously we're going to continue to fund research. Something that the pandemic has demonstrated to all of us is the incredible inequities that exist within our healthcare system. And we know that we can never cure this disease or reduce it if we do not address that. So everything that we're doing now through a health equity lens to make sure that especially people in underserved communities and people of color have access to screening and to treatment and to nutrition and to everything that's important, to help prevent this disease. So we have a health equity lens, and we have had for a long time, but now we're amplifying that, based upon everything that we witnessed in 2020. We're really focusing on getting people to return to screening. Because of the pandemic, a lot of people, rightfully so, made the decision to forego their mammograms, or their colonoscopies or their lung cancer screenings or the PSA or whatever. Unfortunately, we know right now that there are a lot of people out there walking around with cancer that have no idea. So we're trying to get everybody, get the message out that people really need to get back in as soon as they feel safe to get their screenings done. We and the National Cancer Institute estimate that probably in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be at least an incremental 20,000 deaths that will occur from this disease, just from people who, elected not to get their screenings or to keep their screenings up. So, that is a huge impact for us. We're very anxious to get our patient services started back up as soon as it's safe, as far as driving people to treatment, opening our Hope Lodges, where we provide free lodging for caregivers and for patients who need to travel in, to get the best cancer treatment that they can get. And then obviously from an advocacy standpoint, we're going to continue to advocate at both the federal and at the state level, for policies that will help protect cancer patients and also help cancer patients get access to the care that they need. One thing we believe at the American Cancer Society is where you live should not determine if you live. So we really need to do everything we can to make sure everyone has access to the best possible medical care and screenings and treatment and nutrition and everything that they can. The other thing that we have done, which I'm sure many of you probably have done as well, is we have really pivoted to a digital environment, which we're pretty excited about. We can certainly gain a lot of efficiencies in that, and we also think that we can have a broader reach as far as getting the message out and getting the word out. So we are well on our way to a digital platform. Now, I'm very optimistic about where the society is right now, coming out of 2020. The pandemic is starting to subside some. We're getting our vaccines. Hopefully we'll get back to normal before long. For those of you that are not aware, I did announce last August that I am going to be retiring from this position in April of this year after serving as CEO for 6 years. But I want you to know that I'm returning right back to the volunteer ranks. So I'll be right there with you, continue to be there with you and beside you, as we fight this disease. And before I turn it over to Joe, I just want to give you a few facts to think about from a business perspective, because all of you are business executives. First, from a macro perspective, globally, non-communicable diseases like cancer and heart disease kill about 41 million people annually, and that contributes to 71% of all global deaths on an annual basis. Now, unfortunately, here in the United States, 1 out of every 3 individuals will get a cancer diagnosis sometime in their lifetime. So, on this call this morning, if there's 15 of us, that means that 5 of us are going to get a cancer diagnosis. And, obviously myself and Joe and others have already had one. So that's just a fact. The other thing is that the greatest mortality for ages 25 to 65 is cancer. So if you think about it, that is the working age, 25 to 65. So your employees, are going to be diagnosed with cancer, or certainly their spouses, their partners, their family. This is something you might want to look at if you're not already aware, but on average, cancer costs are about 12% on average, of all employee medical costs. $125 billion annually in direct costs for cancer care and treatment. You add to that another $139 billion in diminished productivity costs for your employees, having to miss work for their own diagnosis or having to miss work to be a caregiver. And there's a term that we refer to, which I'm sure you've heard of, called presenteeism, where either the cancer patient is back at work or the cancer caregiver is back at work, but they're really not back at work. They're really trying to deal, with their disease, or with their loved ones. Unfortunately, cancer costs are growing at twice the annual rate of all other medical costs. And I will share some good news with you, is that 50 to 60% of all cancers can be prevented just by the actions that we take as individuals. And that is, not using tobacco. Tobacco causes 1/3 of all cancers. So, not using tobacco, maintaining a healthy weight, eating properly, getting screening, getting your checkups on a regular basis. If people do those things, they can reduce their risk by 50 to 60% of ever having this disease. And that's huge. And that's where you, as leaders and CEOs, can play a huge role in setting that agenda for both your employees, for your companies, for your employees, and also, for your communities. So, in a few minutes, we're going to ask each and every one of you to seriously consider helping us launch a CEOs Against Cancer chapter in the great state of Wisconsin. We think that through your leadership and your platforms, you can have such a incredible impact and help us to have a greater impact, in the state. But before that ask comes, I really want to turn it over to someone who can, who has seen the impact that CEOs Against Cancer, a chapter, can have and does have. Just a true leader in every sense of the word. and just a great individual and a great friend. So now I'm more than happy and also honored to flip it over to Joe Koenig. Joe.
Hey, Gary, thank you very much. Thanks for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And I think does anybody hear the echo? All right, no, I don't hear the echo anymore. But no, I really appreciate that. I think you had some interesting and really interesting to absorb stats that are all important for us to think about there. And yeah, maybe I was one of those people that had cancer for a while and didn't realize it, or I was one of those people that was back to work and still dealt with cancer. It was very difficult. But maybe I'll walk you through some of the, from my perspective, a little bit what happened to me, and then kind of how I've kind of parlayed maybe this pain into some type of purpose moving forward. So I'll start with maybe in 2017, I was diagnosed with a form of head and neck cancer, specifically tongue, where they had to take out 60% of my tongue, as well as 4 mouth cancer and lymph node cancers in my neck. And so what was supposed to be, I never smoked, never chewed tobacco. It was not HPV. It was a complete anomaly of what happened. But at the end of the day, I had cancer. So what are we going to do about it? So the, first started out with a surgery where they removed 30%, but then found they didn't have the margins they needed. So they had to go back in and have a major reconstructive surgery where they'll take tissue from your forearm, an artery from your forearm, and they'll implant that inside of your mouth to help you offset some of the tongue, the 60% of the tongue they took out. But that leaves you immobile, and hence this awesome accent that I have right now. I just hate it, but it is what it is. Get used to it, I guess. But then that was a 12-hour surgery that recovered a lot of time to recover. And then, as pathology comes back, then you have to, all right, what's next? Did they get all the cancer in the neck and the lymph nodes? Is it spread anywhere? And so pathology came back. Yeah, there was cancer in the lymph nodes. So radiation was on my next treatment phase. And, I'm like, well, no chemo. Shoot, that's awesome. Just radiation, piece of cake. So I always hear horror stories about chemotherapy. Didn't hear many about radiation, but boy, oh boy, was I wrong on that one. So that radiation, heavy dose of radiation brought me to my knees. It was bad. Because, you're doing it in your mouth, it's on flesh, and it burns. I lost my ability to swallow. So I had to be on a feeding tube, and that feeding tube lasted for 4 months. I'm on fentanyl, I'm on hydrocodone, oxycodone, lidocaine, and a thing called magic mouthwash, which was nothing magical about it at all. It didn't do anything for me, unfortunately. But and you go through this very difficult time. That time frame for me was from January through they took the feeding tube out in early, almost September 1 was during that time frame. And so in that time frame, I couldn't speak for probably a few months, maybe a little bit more than that. So your other senses are honed in a little bit differently. Your sense of observation and kind of your hearing of what you're doing. So I, throughout that treatment, always was trying to find things that kept my mind off it, that put me back into a place that I dealt with a little bit differently. So one of them was walking. I always, even though I was in so much pain and on so many drugs, I'm not sure those walking straight lines were as straight as they normally should be based on fentanyl. But I did. I went out and walked all the time, almost too much, because that was my escape from reality. But it gave me a lot of time to think about different things and reflect on whether it was past, present, future, and so forth. So it was time that I needed. But after I went back not too long ago and looked at how many miles I walked a day throughout the treatment, and I was just, my average over a 4-month period was 9 miles a day, which is completely insane when I think about that. And it did definitely helped me lose about 50 pounds too, which until my doctor said stop walking. But I kept walking because it just was my shape, and I knew I would build it back. But again, it did help me think about a few words that I would reflect on the journey of that almost year. The first word that, because someone always asks me, man, what was that like? I know you're in pain, it was difficult and so forth. What was that like? And usually 4 words pop in my head immediately. Number 1, it was difficult, very, very hard. Wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. Most pain I've ever been on in my life, and just a strange whole, say, 9 months, to say the least. So very, very difficult. I mean, the other one was humbling. It's always humbling if you know someone who finds out they have cancer. And it's humbling to, for me at least, my wife, my caregiver had to, bathe me for a long period of time. She had to feed me, a lot of times just through the feeding tube, and then help me with food getting down when I was able to swallow in. So the humbling aspects of that are humbling when you're my then 11-year-old's trying to help me with my speech homework that I have to relearn to speak. And so he's helping me, and he was tough. I'll tell you what, I'm not sure I was as tough on him as he was on me, but boy, oh boy, Dad, say dog. I would say dog. And he goes, no, that's not how you say dog. He'd say more enunciation on the D, and I'm like, I'm going to jump over this table and just knock you out. So humbling when those things happen, to say at least, or even humbling when, I remember sitting in the radiation waiting room, and you're seeing all the people in there waiting for the treatments. And, inevitably I'd see a young boy or a young girl that's waiting for treatments, and knowing what they're going through. So very, very humbling, to say the least. And I would say the third word I would use is blessed. And many people would say that, why would you say you're blessed based on what you went through? And, my first response would be, well, I didn't tell you, because I'm able to sit here and talk to you right now. That's why I'm blessed. Because there are people in my support groups, that one sat to the left, one sat to the right, and those chairs are empty right now. And so I know how blessed I am to be in the position I am based on others. So being blessed by that fact, and being blessed that I had an awesome support system around me, led by my wife, as I mentioned earlier. She was an absolute angel. I don't know how she did some of the things she did. And I don't know how I would ever be able to repay her for what she did for me, because she kept me going. She pushed me. She challenged me. She was very compassionate about what I was dealing with, and was just absolutely all and awesome. And if there's one thing I learned about that, is really the true definition of unconditional love. That's for sure, to say the least. I'm so blessed by that. And then friends and family, obviously, as well, that rallied behind me. So that'd be the third word. The fourth word I would say is, I mentioned it kind of in my watts, was a part about reflection. In a time when you can't speak, or you limit your speaking, you do have time to think, observe, and so forth. So I spent a lot of time thinking about many different things. And as I think, even when I thought back then and kind of moved forward to what those reflections would be today, a few of those reflections pop in my head in terms of a journey like I went through. Number one is, I've always been an optimistic kind of person. I've always glass half full, and so forth. But having this, what I call a ferocious optimism, to get to the other side, that was all it was about for me. There was no doubt in my mind I was going to get there. No doubt. I also thought that, another word that popped, I had goals. Every time in my journey, I had goals. I had a goal that I had a goal that was to get to the other side, was the main goal. But I also had mini goals every day that I would set for myself. And in my head, I was going to win every one of those. Every one. I wasn't going to lose one time. Obviously, I was very wrong on that one. But I quickly figured out that when I did lose, I did fall or something, I knew I'd get myself back up, set a new goal, and push forward. Stay strong for myself, stay strong for my family, friends, and move on. Goals were a big thing for me in getting through what I went through. And then I also knew as part of that, I had to have perseverance. I mean, I did fall a lot, and I did, for example, my goal was to never have a feeding tube. Well, I succumbed to that, and I needed a feeding tube for a long time. But then, all right, how am I going to handle the feeding tube, and deal with it? So there were a bunch of those, that perseverance, that get knocked down, get up, and move on, and have that kind of mindset, that mental fortitude, if you will. And then that another one that pops in was this idea of choices. I never realized the importance of choices until I was reflecting on that throughout that journey and even today. Choices as simple as you're in pain, terrible day. How are you going to approach your caregiver, my wife, or your family? How are you going to treat them? When you wake up in the morning, what type of attitude are you going to have? There were so many choices every day that I had to make that I thought about because I tell you, no one's accountable for those but you, but me in this case. I knew that very quickly. I knew that what happened, but I had a choice of how I was going to deal with that and so forth. So choices became a big one. They were small every day, but they were big ones. I had a choice that when I was very sick, watch my son graduate from college at St. Louis University. Probably one of the most sick days I've been. And my wife said, no, you can't go. And I'm like, no, I'm going. And if I get sick, I get sick, but I want to see him walk across that stage. So I put the suit on, went down there, and actually they were on F's because he majored in business. They're on finance. He majored in marketing, and I was starting to feel really sick. And I'm like, how many degrees are between F and M? Couldn't think of that many. So I'm like, I need to run. So I ran to the bathroom and got sick and came back just in time to snap a picture of him walking across the stage. But that was a choice that I made. And the last and one important that's as well as important to me was my mom passed away right after I was coming back from this. So in September. And so it was a choice. Do I do the eulogy? And that was not only difficult, just from a being able to speak and so forth at that time, but obviously the emotional aspect of that as well. And that choice was, I had to do it. I was compelled to do it. I'm not sure how it was going to sound, not sure how it was going to come off, but I did it. And it was probably one of the most courage I think I've showed in my life to do that. But it was something that was very important, but that was a choice. And if I think about choices throughout, the journey and choices since the journey, that has been something that's continued to resonate with me, is the essence of choices. And there's an author out there, John O'Leary, who wrote this book On Fire. And he also wrote this book called In Awe, who happens to live in St. Louis. I've had coffee with him several times. And he wrote in this book, and I've taken this kind of heart, and the essence of choice is you can't always choose the path that you walk in life, but you can always choose the manner in which you walk it. And when I think about that, I think about, all of us have choices throughout our lives, whether you're dealing with cancer or dealing with something else. Choices are important, have become a major word for me when I talk to people, because we are accountable for our own choices. Yes, we have support around us to help make the right choices, but at the end of the day, it's up to us to make those choices. So, and one of my choices, kind of moving forward based on what I had to deal with, was this idea of a survivor's obligation. That's a choice that I have. And I know that I've been given a great responsibility of what's happened to me and what's the results of that and the position I'm in. And that obligation is important to me. And I remember a quote from Jim Kelly, who had some of the same cancer that I had in the head and neck. And his point was in one of his podcasts I listened to was, I even wrote it down, make a difference for someone today who may be fighting for their tomorrow. And to me, when I think about what that means to people, and I taught many one-on-ones with people dealing with cancer, not just head and neck, but all types of cancers, and spend time with them. That's one of the things I do to give that. And I'm always enamored by their perspective, their choices, and their overall optimism or pessimism, depending on who they are and how they're reacting to what they're dealing with, and try to provide maybe some light to some of the challenges that they're dealing around the darkness. So that is absolutely a big thing for me, is a survivor's obligation. And then how do you take that survivor's obligation, the pain and so forth, and parlay that into that purpose? And how I have done it, besides sitting with one-on-ones with cancer patients and being a mentor out there for many, is I've also found, obviously, the American Cancer Society, what we're talking about here today. when I came back from my my journey or my treatment, I found out our CEO Jim Kavanaugh was part of this American Cancer Society CEOs in Cancer, and he actually was leading the effort also to drive this capital campaign for our new Hope Lodge. And so I asked Jim, I'm like, man, I was on for a while, but when did you get involved with them? I don't remember you ever. It was well, I got involved several months ago, and I'm like, really just curious, what made you? Well, because of you, because of what you're dealing with, and many of the other worldwide people in our family are dealing with, and the importance of that aspect for the business of worldwide technology, and so that brought me into the fold as well. I mean, absolutely count me in on this great organization and the mission that they represent. And so I was involved in the Hope Lodge Capital campaign. And there's a picture of me and Gary up on stage when he asked me to come up and say a few words. And so involved in the Champions of Hope galas, involved in the couple of the other HCS galas. I was in the Chicago Discovery Ball, where I was a mission speaker, which, by the way, which was really interesting. Gary will remember this, but I even said when I kicked off this speech as a mission speaker, I said 8 years ago I attended this event in Chicago as a sponsor of the American Cancer Society. Just had a table, worldwide sponsored it, never knowing 8 years later I'd be sitting there being the mission speaker for this event. And it was just a bit strange, to say the least. But that's the involvement that I feel is so important around that. And then jumping on the CEOs Against Cancer campaign, because I think the impact, as Gary mentioned, that we all can have on the workplace around awareness, prevention, helping in patient care, raising funds, research, and so forth is very, very important. And so when I think about what it means to our employees and how this resonates, everyone's been touched by cancer in some way, shape, or form, personally, friends, family, and so forth, coworkers. And so how do we make a play? How can we help really drive this awareness and prevention? So the American Cancer Society, through the CEOs group, has put together some great campaigns to help make that happen. Whether it's the Great American Smokeout that was referenced kind of earlier in terms of the focus on tobacco, or it was wellness screenings that we have for our employees, or it's a scorecard that the ACS comes in and kind of provides a scorecard about how Worldwide is doing, from screenings, from awareness, from lunch and learns, from an index they create for this report is fantastic. But they, whether it's a mammogram van, breast cancer awareness play, all those are very important pieces to help drive greater awareness and prevention to the workplace. That, what Gary said, that has such a profound impact on our employees, costs, challenges, kind of moving forward. So there's a lot out there. And the one that I always like to reference is one that I engaged in last year, was the Fit to Be Cancer Free. And what I thought was really cool about that was, one is like, all right, as a member of the executive that's in charge of it for Worldwide last year, I was tasked throughout the campaign, where they give you a number of steps that they challenge you on, and it's a challenge between other CEOs around the U.S. And so, but it's just fun, and it gets out there and drives it. But what this one was, it drove engagement to our employees as well. So then I challenged our employees for a 3-week campaign to go out and step it out and step up to cancer. And so and so it was fantastic. We had I don't remember the darn stats now, but we raised $50,000 for that particular event. Not a huge amount of money, but it was more. That was all from our employees, by the way. And it was also they had walked. I think we walked. Our goal was to walk 52 million steps for all of our employees in that 3-week period. And that was the amount of steps that you walk around the globe. And so we ended up at 135 million steps overall. We had like 800 people engaged in this, and we had an app that the ACS put out there for us to leverage to show engagement, to show some fun. Hey, I'm walking down this road and a beautiful view of a lake, and they'll take a picture of a lake. So a major engagement that drove this kind of this awareness to a whole nother level. So events like that really has an impact on the cancer side, but also on your employee side, mental health, wellness, and so forth, that I think is just second to none. So, so that's a little bit about my journey. Trust me, I'm spending a lot of time on my journey. My journey it's not over. There's always ongoing challenges. There always will be, but the journey and the importance of parlaying that pain to purpose, and that purpose is what we're doing right now, and that's this survivor's obligation, how we all can make an impact on this great mission that American Cancer Society has, and that's to save lives, celebrate lives, and lead the fight for a world without cancer. So that's my story. That's my play. And Gary, David, Andrew, if I missed anything, I'd love to answer any questions or any other thoughts you guys may have.
No, Joe, I think you covered it, and your story is inspiring. Thank you for taking the time today to tell us about your story and how you did parlay that into a tremendous legacy of giving back to the fight against cancer. And I've seen Joe speak. I've seen the way he's engaged people, and that is truly a legacy that's going to keep paying forward for years and years to come. And so before we open it up for some discussion, we're at that point in the call where we want to make an ask of this group. And our ask is pretty simple. We'd like you to help us launch a CEOs Against Cancer chapter in the state of Wisconsin. Like I said earlier, this is going to be one of 15 chapters across the country. You're going to be joining over 300 executives that are engaged in this initiative already. The time commitment is not a lot. We want to really emphasize that. We typically hold 2 meetings a year of the chapter. And the team I introduced earlier, Andrew and Lori, they're going to be doing all the behind the scenes heavy lifting. But what we're going to need your help to do is to network with other people to pull them into this chapter. We really need you to not only validate the important work that will come out of this chapter, but also help us pull in some new folks. And so our ask is, will you help us launch this chapter and be an inaugural member of CEOs Against Cancer in Wisconsin? So with that ask, I'd like to just open it up for some feedback and questions for Gary, myself, Joe, Andrew, Lori. We're all here to answer your questions and get your thoughts.
I have a quick question. Joe, thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate you sharing that journey, and it has been a journey for sure, but I think it really motivates people after hearing you to think long and hard about how they could say no to this ask. My question is around the equity lens, and just wanting to know more about what's happening in our region as it relates to your work.
That is a great question, Cecilia, and I would love it if Lori could come off mute and share a little bit, about our work. We've had a long-standing partnership with Kohl's, and they provided some incredible funding for us to really make Wisconsin one of the early places where we were venturing into the whole area of health equity. But Lori can speak to this better than I can. So Lori, I'll let you talk.
Absolutely. So in Wisconsin, I feel like we are trying to approach the health equity work from a variety of angles. As Dave mentioned, through some corporate partnerships, we've been able to do work with different community partners through our Kohl's grant program. It has allowed us to hit a very diverse population, FQHCs and community health centers for multiple different groups and neighborhoods across Milwaukee. In addition, we've this year with the pandemic and kind of some of our transportation barriers becoming greater because of the pandemic, we were able to utilize some of those funds to help directly give to our health systems and health partners to make sure that patients were able to kind of reduce those barriers in a way that fit their need during these times. So it's a incredible opportunity that we've been engaging some of our partners in engaging in some of that work. In addition, through our NFL Crucial Catch program, we have a couple of change grants here in Wisconsin that are focused around breast cancer and lung cancer. One of those is up in northern Wisconsin, two are in Milwaukee, and they're already seeing 10% increases in some of the screening rates to help people get back on track for those breast cancer screenings as well as lung cancer. In addition, I think this is one of my points of pride here in Wisconsin, and specifically in Milwaukee. The American Cancer Society has a grant through the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and we have a community health project here in Milwaukee where we have pulled together 11 different community partners to talk about what is our greatest need here to help impact the cancer diagnosis rate here in Milwaukee. And that project itself is very much focused on access to healthy options and really focusing in on how health and how food and activity really can impact cancer outcomes for the community. So it's very much focused on educating in very specific zip codes, as well as multi-generational conversation. So it's a very exciting project. The pandemic has slowed it down in the sense that we've just had to reconfigure how we were doing things to reach the community and help share education on cancer impact. And then I'd say the last two would be ACS CAN, our American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. We are always advocating for tobacco control, accelerating cures, and really that access to care to make sure everyone has an option and can get the care that they need. So that advocacy piece is a huge part here in Wisconsin. We've got a huge team of volunteers across the state helping us be a voice for the cancer patient. And lastly, it's really our volunteer base. We have a state leadership board here that is very engaged around health equity for the last at least 3 years. We've done a lot of education and learning on what that means and how we can have the greatest impact, and how our volunteers can really bring that back into their communities and integrate it into our events and integrate it into just the community relationships that we have across the state. So those are a lot, but also just a few of the things that we're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to highlight a couple things, Lori, and terrific job in covering that. I know that Mark Murphy is on the phone, and we do have, our partnership with the NFL, which funds all of those, screenings and underserved areas, and certainly our partnership with the Packers, we're, very, very proud of. And on the Robert Wood Johnson grant, that was a grant they gave us about 3 years ago for $10 million. And the first part of it was for us to educate ourselves and our staff on health equity and what it is and what it's not, to make sure that we could talk about it properly. And then part of it is for these 12 pilots that we have going across the country to really look at to work with the communities to determine what are the social determinants of health in that specific community that is really driving the major cause of the inequities, and then come up with workable solutions to address that. So something that we're very excited about, and as I said earlier, really committed to. We know that we have got to be part of the solution to addressing the health equities that exist in the system if we're going to be able to have the impact on this disease that we need to.
Yeah, Gary, I would just say, on behalf of the Packers and the NFL, the Crucial Catch program, in our mind, has been a huge success. And it's like we all talked about, one of the most important things you can do is have a robust screening program, and, getting people tested and screened on a regular basis is so important.
Yeah, there are so many cancers that are preventable or manageable, if we catch them. And catch them soon enough. So it's critical. And unfortunately, like we've seen in the underserved communities, and especially the communities of color, that's where a lot of the greatest challenges are. So we really need to step that up.
If I could just add one thing, and I'm sure your work has seen this, but I'm a breast cancer survivor. And I was blown away to learn about this whole notion of people being diagnosed and then not returning for treatment. So I think as we're working on trying to make sure that people are screened, I think that second round of doubling back after people are diagnosed is an issue that we really need to keep top of mind. And I think some of it is health access, but also trust. And so I just throw that out there.
Great points.
No, you're absolutely right. And unfortunately, the mortality rate for Black women is 40% greater than for white women for breast cancer specifically. And a lot of it, Cecilia, is due to a lot of the factors that you mentioned. First of all, making sure they are getting their mammograms, but then second of all, making sure that if they are diagnosed, that they're able to get treatment. And there's a lot of factors that prevent them from getting treatment. One is trust. One is, lack of transportation, lack of resources, lack of childcare. So there's a lot of systemic issues that really need to be addressed to make sure that there's parity in outcome.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts or questions?
One thing that I want to emphasize, and I've had a chance to speak with a couple of you in advance, is as a CEO, one of the most precious resources you have is your time. And I just do want to emphasize that this is not a huge time commitment. This is all about leadership. And, Lori and Andrew and our teams will be doing, all the behind the scenes work. But what we really need is your leadership and your commitment to really make this work. And Joe, I think if I've misstated anything, please correct me, because I know that that's what CEOs always worry about is, can I carve out time, to actually do this?
No, I think you're right, Gary. It really isn't. And it's really up, to me, it's setting the tone at our level, right? And I'll tell you, when you do, it is amazing to me how the employees rally around it. And for example, when I mentioned that Fit to Be Cancer Free, all I did was send a challenge. I did a 5-minute video and sent it out to everybody. And the amount of people that jumped in, it's so fantastic. You're doing this. They're sponsoring it. My mom just passed away from cancer. My brother just got diagnosed with cancer. Blah, blah. It's infectious. And I'll tell you, the amount of momentum that you gain by just setting a tone and letting your employees know you're involved and providing some of these services that Gary and everyone's mentioned here. It's immense and so impactful to the people. And when something, and I've run across this recently with one of our employees, when something is uncovered because of a screen that we're providing, I mean, the amount of gratitude that employee had because of what would have happened if we didn't do that and it progressed before being treated, it's immense. So I think the things that we can do to set the tone right, to get engaged, 2 meetings a month or 2 meetings a year are not that difficult. And the agendas are action packed. They're not long meetings either. But the ability then to get stuff done around execution of some of these plans is very important. So, yeah, I agree. It's 100%. But that little time commitment, is parlayed to an immense impact for our employees out there.
Well, to that end, I guess I would ask the group. I saw when I asked earlier a lot of heads nodding. So, to my ask, are you guys prepared to help us launch this chapter?
Yeah, this is Kevin. I'm certainly willing to. I appreciate the discussions that we've had today, and it makes sense what you're asking. The thing we have to balance is certainly our time, but also looking at our employees and initiatives that are underway with soliciting of different types of funds for different types of organizations. How do we fit that in an appropriate way? Because we don't want to. Well, guys know what I'm about to say. You have to be careful not to bombard your employees with too much. So I know that the tone is set at the top. We all have had opportunities in family, as has been said, and friends with cancer. So this is certainly a meaningful activity. You have my support to dive a little bit deeper in it. There's some things that certainly I'd like to learn along the way with this. So yes, from my perspective, I'm willing to spend some time helping out.
Great. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, Joe Rock here. I agree. I don't have much to add. I agree with everything Kevin just said. So we can add it. Add this to my plate.
The one thing that and I don't know if David, you're gonna say don't say it, but I'll say it anyway. I'm usually good at that. But from an employee side, I don't don't expect anything from employees in terms of monetary contributions. I don't. But our job and my job and Jim Kavanaugh and the other owner's job is this is all about assistance and help for the employees. This isn't about asking for a donation from them. I mean, we'll do what we have to do with what's right for the business and so forth. And if they want to participate in a program that has that or a fundraiser, that's their decision. But I want to make sure that this is not asked of all of our employees to start donating money. It's not. This is about our time and creating a process to help really drive an impact in that prevention and awareness. Hopefully, David, Gary, and Andrew, I said that correctly. Don't yell at me if I didn't.
No, it was perfect, because I think what we'll all find and what we've seen again and again with our CEO chapters is your employees are going to care deeply about this mission because they've been impacted, they've been touched by this. And so giving them platforms to engage, they want to engage and they find meaning in that engagement. And so that's really what we're shooting for here. We don't want to force anyone to do anything they don't want to do. We want to create platforms that really provide meaning and purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only thing I'd add, and Joe, I'm glad you had said earlier about the Fit to Be Cancer-Free Challenge. I think that each of you will be amazed at the reaction from your employees once they realize that you're making a commitment, at your level, to help fight against cancer. And it reminds me kind of like your Fit to Be experience, Joe. A couple years ago, Boeing was our presenting sponsor at the Chicago Discovery Ball. And at the time, Dennis Muhlenberg was CEO. And just on a whim, kind of like you did with Fit to Be Cancer Free, he sent out a communication to the Boeing employees and said, we're going to be supporting the American Cancer Society this year. If there's anything that you would like to do to help raise money to support the society, whatever you raise, we'll match it dollar for dollar. And he told me, he said, I was amazed that people came out of the woodwork and they started setting up web pages and challenges and everything. And the whole employee base rallied around it. The employees ended up raising $750,000. And of course, then Boeing matched that. But he told me, he said, I've never seen anything like it before, Gary. He said, everybody's been impacted by this disease. And when they have an opportunity to rally around it and to feel like they're contributing, just incredible things happen. So I think the same will happen here as well in your own organizations.
Well, and thank you for those commitments. And we'll be following up with everyone one-on-one. So we look forward to those conversations. Gary, I'll give you the final word, and we'll end the meeting on time.
Yeah, and I know that's a promise we made, so I have to talk fast, which is kind of hard for me to do being from the South. But anyway, just really want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your commitment, for engaging in this conversation and for helping us get this chapter up and running. It'll allow us to have a much greater impact in the great state of Wisconsin. One thing we are hoping to do is to get the group formed, and we are hoping to have our first meeting. We're having a golf tournament at Whistling Straits in the middle of June, and we're hoping to use that as an opportunity to kick off this chapter with a meeting early in the morning. The meetings always are early, from 7:30 until 9 or 7 till 8 or whatever, and then hopefully enjoy some good golf afterwards. So stay tuned. That's something to look forward to, where we can all get together and have some fun and really celebrate the progress we're making against this disease. So once again, sorry we're 1 minute over, but really do appreciate each and every one of you joining in today.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Bye,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.